At my son's engagement party, I gave his fiancée a small envelope. She laughed. "Is this a coupon, Mom?" She held it up so her friends could see. Everyone at the table turned. Her mother leaned over, looked inside, and smiled the way people smile when they're trying not to laugh. My son said nothing, just looked at his plate. The envelope contained a single key. They had no idea what it opened. The next morning, I drove to Hartwell Savings on Clement Street. I sat across from the branch manager. He opened my account on his screen, and his face changed the way. Faces change when numbers don't match the person sitting in front of them. "Mrs. Calloway," he said quietly, "how can we help you today?" Quick question before we go further. Have you ever given someone a gift and watched them decide it wasn't worth their time before they even opened it? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe. Now let me tell you what that key actually opened. The engagement party was held at the Hargrove Room, a private event space on the 3rd floor of the Meridian Hotel downtown. My son's fiancée, her name was Cassandra, had chosen it because it had a rooftop view and because the deposit was non-refundable once the invitations went out. 70 guests, canapes, an open bar that cost more than my first car. I had taken the train in from Millbrook, the same town where I'd lived for 31 years, wearing the navy dress I'd bought for my nephew's college graduation 2 springs ago. I pressed it myself that morning. I carried a small gift bag with tissue paper folded at the top, the kind you buy in a pack of 10 at the dollar store. I knew what it looked like. That was the point. Cassandra was 29, a marketing coordinator with a talent for making everything around her feel curated. Her hair was always done. Her apartment, the one my son moved into after 6 months of dating, looked like a showroom. Every surface had a candle or a book arranged at an angle. When she spoke about the wedding, she used words like vision and brand. When she spoke about me, I had learned she used the word quaint. I found that out from my son's cousin, who sat behind her at a bridal shower planning brunch and heard Cassandra describe me to her mother as sweet but very quaint. Her mother had asked what I did. Cassandra said, "She works at the dry cleaners in her town. She's been there forever. It's very her." She wasn't wrong. I had worked at Millbrook Cleaners for 22 years. I pressed shirts and altered hems and steamed wedding dresses before other women's daughters wore them. I knew the weight of fabric. I knew how to make something last. What Cassandra didn't know, what my son didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that I had owned Millbrook Cleaners since 2004. And Millbrook Cleaners was not just a dry cleaner. It was the anchor tenant of a 6-unit commercial strip on Fenwick Avenue that I had bought at foreclosure auction for $340,000 when everyone told me I was throwing money away on a dying block. The block was not dying. It was waiting. I found my seat at the engagement party near the back of the room, the table with my son's college roommate and 2 cousins from out of town who nobody knew how to place. Fine by me. I watched Cassandra move through the room like she'd choreographed it, touching shoulders, laughing at the right moments, steering my son toward the photographer with her hand at the small of his back. My son Daniel was 31. He had his father's eyes and his father's habit of going quiet when he didn't know what to say. His father had been a machinist. Good man. Gone 12 years now. Daniel had grown up watching me work, watching me count, watching me buy things other people overlooked. He had not inherited my eye for that. He had inherited his father's belief that the woman he loved must know what she was doing. Cassandra's mother, Renata, found me before the main course. She was a woman who wore her money like a second skin. Not flashy, just permanent. The kind of wealth that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. She sat down in the empty chair beside me and said, "You must be so thrilled. Daniel is just wonderful." I said I was. I asked about her family. She told me about Cassandra's father's commercial real estate firm, about the vacation property in Hilton Head, about Cassandra's brother who was finishing his MBA. Then she looked at my gift bag on the table and said, with genuine warmth, "How sweet that you brought something tonight. Most people just do the registry." When Cassandra opened gifts after dinner, she started with the larger boxes, a stand mixer, a set of copper cookware, crystal champagne flutes from Renata's sister. She read each card, held each item up, said the right things. When she got to my bag, she was already loosening. The room had that soft, buzzing energy of people on their 3rd drink, comfortable, distracted. She pulled out the tissue paper, looked inside, pulled out the key. It was a plain brass key on a simple ring. No label, no explanation in the card, just a line I'd written. "This opens something that's been yours since before you knew it existed." Cassandra looked at the key, looked at me across the room, looked back at the key. Then she held it up and said, in the bright, carrying voice she used when she performed for a room, "Is this a coupon, Mom?" She said Mom the way people say it when they don't mean it yet. The table nearest her laughed. Her friend Britt said, "Maybe it's to her storage unit." More laughter. My son looked at his plate. Cassandra set the key on the gift table and moved to the next box. The key sat there for the rest of the evening, ignored between a card from a coworker and a ribbon that had fallen off something else. I left at 9. I took the train back to Millbrook. I let myself into my house, the one I'd paid off in 2017, and I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile and the folder I kept in the second drawer of my filing cabinet. The folder was labeled Fenwick Properties, Current. Inside, 6 commercial leases, 3 residential units I'd added to the back of the property in 2011, a storage facility on Route 9 that I'd acquired in a private sale from a man retiring to Florida, and the cleaners itself. Monthly income, after expenses, $11,200. Net worth of the portfolio assessed last year, $4.1 million. The key opened the back office of the cleaners, where I kept the original deed of purchase, framed, because the day I signed it was the day I understood that invisible work and visible work were not the same thing, and that I could do both. I had never told Daniel about any of it, not because I was ashamed, because I wanted to see who he chose and what he valued before I handed him anything. His father and I had talked about this years ago, lying in bed on a Sunday morning when Daniel was 11 and had just told us that one of his friend's dads was basically useless because he drove a 10-year-old truck. His father said, "We let him figure it out on his own. We don't rescue him from the lesson." I had agreed. I was still waiting for Daniel to figure it out. 3 days after the party, he called me. I was steaming a bridesmaid's dress in the back of the cleaners when my phone buzzed on the counter. "Hey, Mom." He sounded fine. Not apologetic, not uncomfortable, just normal. "Thanks for coming Saturday. Cassie wanted me to say thank you for the gift." Did she figure out what the key opens? A pause. I mean, she figured it was probably to your place in Millbrook. She said it was a really sweet gesture. I put down the steamer. "Tell Cassandra the key opens the office at Millbrook Cleaners. Tell her she should come look at what's in the office before she decides what it is." Another pause. Longer. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. I'll talk to you soon." I hung up and went back to the bridesmaid's dress. I hired a private investigator 6 weeks before the engagement party. His name was Gerald Okafor, and he had spent 19 years with the county sheriff's department before opening his own firm in Westbrook. A woman from my bank had referred him to me quietly after I'd asked, during a meeting about updating my estate documents, whether she knew anyone who was thorough and didn't talk. I had reasons. Cassandra's father's firm, the commercial real estate company Renata had mentioned so easily at the party, had a name, Stanton Meridian Group. I had heard that name before. I had heard it in 2019 when a broker contacted me about selling Fenwick Avenue, said a regional buyer was assembling parcels in Millbrook for a mixed-use development. I had said no. The broker had come back twice. The regional buyer had never identified themselves, but the offer had been specific enough about my property's details, the lot dimensions, the lease terms, the storage facility on Route 9, that whoever was behind it had done homework. Detailed homework. I had wanted to know who was doing the homework. Gerald confirmed it 2 weeks before the engagement party. The entity behind the acquisition offers was a subsidiary of Stanton Meridian Group. Cassandra's father had been quietly trying to buy Fenwick Avenue for 3 years without revealing who he was. He'd been using a shell company. He'd also, Gerald found, been doing this in 4 other towns in the county, always through subsidiaries, always without disclosing the parent entity to sellers. That wasn't necessarily illegal. It was a common enough tactic in commercial real estate. But Gerald had kept looking, the way thorough people do, and he had found something else. In 2021, Stanton Meridian had settled a civil suit brought by a seller in Dearborn County who claimed the company had misrepresented zoning projections during a sale negotiation, inflating the projected value of adjacent development to pressure a quick close. The settlement was sealed. The seller had signed an NDA, but the suit itself was a matter of public record, and Gerald had found 3 other sellers in 2 other counties who had stories they were willing to tell off the record. It was a pattern. Find an elderly or financially unsophisticated seller. Suggest the property was in the path of major development. Create urgency. Close fast at below market value. Develop or flip. Cassandra's family had a system, and Daniel was about to marry into it. I didn't tell Daniel. Not yet. For the same reason I hadn't told him about the portfolio. He needed to see it clearly, not hear it from me and spend years wondering whether his mother had been jealous of his wife. Instead, I called my attorney, Margaret Chu, who had handled my estate planning since 2008 and who I trusted because she had never once told me what I wanted to hear when the truth was more useful. I want to restructure the Fenwick entities, I told her. I want everything consolidated under a single trust, with updated documentation showing clear provenance, all purchases, all improvements, every dollar. I paused. I also want a second trust established for my son with a triggering condition. Margaret asked what the condition was. He has to ask for it himself, not because of a wedding or an inheritance or anything I prompt. He has to come to me and ask to understand what I built and why. Only then does the trust become active. She was quiet for a moment. And if he never asks? Then it goes to the Millbrook Community Foundation, and we fund the trades apprenticeship program I've been thinking about for years. I'll have the documents ready in 3 weeks. 22 days after the engagement party, Daniel called again. This time he was not fine. Cassie's dad called me, he said. He wants to meet. He said something about property you own in Millbrook and that it might be part of a development corridor and that you should talk to someone before you make any decisions. A beat. Mom, what's he talking about? What property? I set down my coffee. Tell me exactly what he said. Daniel repeated it. Cassandra's father had framed it as concern. He'd said he had contacts in regional planning, that Fenwick Avenue was likely to be rezoned within 18 months, that an elderly owner holding a small strip without professional guidance could end up on the wrong side of a condemnation offer. He'd said he'd be happy to connect me with someone. He'd made it sound like a favor. It was not a favor. It was the 4th approach in 3 years, and this time he was using my son to make it. Daniel, I said, how long have you known about Fenwick Avenue? Silence. How long has Cassandra known? More silence. Then, she mentioned her dad had looked into property in Millbrook a while ago. She said it was just research. She didn't think it was connected to you. I asked him carefully, do you know what I own in Millbrook? The pause before he answered told me everything. He didn't know. He had never asked. In 31 years, I had gone to work every morning and come home every evening, and he had never asked what the work actually was, what it had built, what it was worth. Not because he was cruel, because he had assumed. He had assumed his mother worked at a dry cleaner because that was what she did, and he had loved her for it, and he had never looked further because love, he thought, didn't require looking. Mom, he said quietly, what do you own? Come to Millbrook on Saturday, I said. Come to the cleaners. I'll show you. He came alone. Cassandra was at a bridal shower in Hartford, which I had not arranged but appreciated. I unlocked the front of the shop at 9 in the morning and took him through it. The pressing equipment, the alteration station, the dry cleaning unit in the back that we'd updated in 2019. He had been in the shop 100 times. He thought he knew it. I took him to the back office. I unlocked it with the same key I'd given Cassandra. The frame deed was on the wall. The filing cabinets were labeled clearly. I pulled out the portfolio folder and set it on the desk. He read for 11 minutes. I counted because I was watching his face. When he looked up, his eyes were different. Not ashamed exactly. Something more complicated. You own this building, and 5 others on this block, and the storage facility on Route 9, and 3 residential units behind the commercial strip. Since when? The cleaners since 2004, the strip since 2007, the residential units since 2011. He looked at the folder again. Why didn't you tell me? I sat down across from him. Because I wanted to see what you built on your own without a net, and I wanted to see who you brought home before I handed you the keys to something I spent 30 years creating." He was quiet for a long moment. "And Cassandra's father. He's made 4 attempts to acquire this block in 3 years. The most recent one was through you. I watched that land. Watched him put it together. Watched his face go through something I recognized. The particular expression of a person who has been trusting the wrong information and is only now running the numbers. She didn't know," he said finally. It was half a statement and half a question. "I don't know what she knew," I said honestly. "But I know her father used my son to get to me, and I know that's not how people act when they have nothing to hide." Daniel put the folder down. He looked at the framed deed on the wall for a long moment. Then he said, "What did Gerald find?" I hadn't mentioned Gerald. "How do you know about Gerald?" "Because I know you," he said quietly. "You don't move without knowing the full picture. You never have." I looked at my son for a long moment. Sometimes you raise a person and you think the work didn't take, and then they say one true thing, and you understand it took exactly as long as it needed to. I gave him Gerald's report. He read it in the car. He was in there for 40 minutes. When he came back inside, his face was set in a way that reminded me so much of his father, I had to look away for a moment. "I need to talk to Cassandra," he said. "Yes," I said. "You do." "What do I say?" "Tell her what you found. Watch how she responds. That will tell you everything you need to know about who she is." He nodded slowly. "And if she didn't know, then she'll be angry at her father and honest with you about it. And if she did—" I didn't answer that. He already knew. What happened over the next 3 weeks was between Daniel and Cassandra, and I stayed out of it the way I had stayed out of every lesson I'd ever tried to let him reach on his own. He called me twice, short calls. He was thinking out loud more than asking questions. I listened. I said very little. On a Tuesday evening in the 3rd week, he called and said, "She knew the property was in Millbrook. She says she didn't know it was yours. Her father told her it was owned by a retired woman who didn't have representation, and that it was a good opportunity for the family to get involved in county development." A long pause. "She says she didn't connect the address to you. Do you believe her?" A longer pause. "I believe she told herself a version of that story that let her not look too hard." I said nothing. "That's not the same as lying," he said. "But it's not honesty either." "No," I agreed. "It's not." The engagement was not called off. That is not what this story is. Daniel and Cassandra had a long and difficult series of conversations that I was not party to, and somewhere in those conversations, Cassandra looked at something true about her family and about herself, and she had to decide what to do with it. What she did was this. She called me. It was a Sunday morning, and I was at the cleaners doing the week's books when my phone rang with her name on it. I answered. "Mrs. Calloway," she said. Her voice was different. The performance was gone. "I owe you an apology. More than one." She paused. "The key. The night of the party. I was cruel, and I was stupid, and I am sorry." I waited. "My father's firm," she said. "I knew more than I told Daniel. Not everything, but enough that I should have asked questions, and I didn't, because asking questions about my father's business has never been something we did in my family." Another pause. "I think I understood on some level that not asking was a form of permission. I'm not proud of that." I was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, a woman I recognized was walking her dog down Fenwick Avenue. The same woman who'd been bringing her coats to us for 15 years. "What are you going to do about it?" I asked. "I already told Daniel everything I know about the Millbrook acquisition attempt and the others. He's deciding what he wants to do with that information." A breath. "And I told my father that I won't be used as a channel to anyone in Daniel's family again. He didn't take it well." "I imagine not." "Mrs. Calloway, I don't know if you'll ever trust me. I'm not asking you to yet. I'm just asking if there's a way to start over from a real place instead of a performance. I thought about 30 years of pressing other people's clothes, of learning that fabric tells you the truth about how something was made if you're willing to look. I thought about a key on an engagement gift table sitting between a ribbon and a coworker's card. "Come to Millbrook next Saturday," I said. "Come to the cleaners. There's work to do, and I'd rather know who you are when you're working than when you're performing." She came. She came without Daniel the first time, which I respected. She wore jeans and a plain shirt, and she asked questions that were real questions, not the networking kind, not the flattering kind. What did the foreclosure auction look like? How did I know the block was worth buying? How did I manage the leases in the early years when I was still running the shop myself? I answered her honestly. I showed her the ledgers from 2004, the handwritten ones from before I moved everything to a spreadsheet. I showed her the photograph I kept in the bottom drawer of the desk, me and 2 women I'd hired in the first year. All 3 of us standing in front of the building the day the sign went up. We were all tired. We were all smiling. She looked at that photograph for a long time. "My mother's never worked," she said. "Not judgmental, just a fact she was turning over. I don't think she knows how to see it. Work. What it actually means. A lot of people don't," I said, "until they do it." We were quiet for a moment. "I want to understand what you built," she said, "not because of what it's worth, because Daniel loves you, and I treated you like a punchline at my own engagement party, and that has bothered me every single day since I did it." She looked at me directly. "I want to earn the right to be in your family. Not the money. The family." I looked at her for a long moment, at this young woman who had been raised to perform and had chosen, at least on this particular Saturday morning, to stop. "Then come back Thursday," I said. "I'm meeting with the Millbrook Small Business Association about a grant program for first-generation owners on this block. I could use a second pair of hands." She came back Thursday, and the Thursday after that. 6 months later, the Fenwick Avenue strip was fully occupied for the first time in its history. We had brought in a bakery run by a Haitian-American woman who'd been selling from her home kitchen for 4 years, a key cutting and repair shop operated by a veteran from the county's reintegration program, and a tutoring center staffed by 3 retired teachers. The storage facility on Route 9 was being converted to a maker's space for small batch manufacturers, a project I'd been thinking about for 2 years, and which Cassandra had helped me present to the county development office in language that got us on the priority list. Cassandra's father had sent a lawyer's letter in February, a final attempt to argue that the original acquisition discussions had created a preliminary agreement. Margaret Chu had responded in 4 lines. We didn't hear from Stanton Meridian Group again. Daniel and Cassandra married in October, not at a hotel, at the Fenwick Community Courtyard, which we'd built out in September with picnic tables and string lights and planters that the tenants had filled themselves. 70 people again, but different 70. The woman from the bakery brought the cake. The retired teachers from the tutoring center sat in the front row. The veteran from the key shop was Daniel's surprise choice for a reading. Before the ceremony, Cassandra found me in the back office getting ready. She was in her dress and she looked, I will tell you honestly, beautiful, not curated, beautiful. She held out her hand. In her palm was the brass key, the one from the engagement party. She'd had it engraved on the back. It said, "I see it now." I looked at her for a long moment. "Keep it," I said. "It's still yours." She put it on a chain around her neck and wore it at her wedding. That evening, after the guests had gone and Daniel was loading the last of the chairs into the truck with the veteran from the key shop, I sat alone in the back office with the lights low and the folder from the second drawer open on the desk, the framed deed on the wall, the photograph of the 3 tired, smiling women. I had not built this for the money. I had built it because in 1994 I was 43 years old, widowed, living on what I made pressing other people's clothes, and I understood that the only difference between the woman who owns the building and the woman who rents the chair inside it is not talent and not intelligence and not even luck. It is the willingness to see what other people have decided not to look at. I had seen a block that everyone called dying. I had looked at it and seen what it was waiting to become. My phone buzzed. "Daniel," I answered. "You still in the office?" "Just finishing up. I wanted to say thank you." His voice was quiet. "For not giving up on me, for letting me get there myself." "You got there," I said. "That's what matters. Cassie loves you. I want you to know that. The real version, not the version that was trying to impress anyone." I looked at the key hook on the wall beside the desk where I kept the office spares. 1 key per hook. Every one accounted for. "I know," I said. "I can see it now too." After I hung up, I turned off the office light, locked the back door, walked out through the front of the shop, and stood for a moment on Fenwick Avenue in the October dark. The bakery sign was still lit. Inside, I could see the owner wiping down her counter, the last task of a long day, the quiet that follows good work. I had done that work for 30 years before anyone saw it. I had done it in the mornings before the street was awake, and in the evenings after it went quiet, and in all the ordinary hours in between. I had done it without a sign on my back, or a title on my door, or anyone to hand me a key and say, "This is yours, you earned it." I had given myself that key. That was how it started. What I want you to take from this story is not the money. Money is just what patience looks like when you add enough time. What I want you to take is this: the work you do in the quiet hours, the work nobody photographs, the work that earns you the word quaint from people who haven't looked carefully enough. That work is your foundation. It holds everything up whether anyone knows about it or not. Do the work, keep the records, hold on to the key. And if someone laughs before they've looked, let them. They'll understand eventually. The only question is whether you're still there when they do. If this story spoke to something you've been carrying, tell me about it in the comments. I read every one. And if you know someone who's been doing quiet work for a long time without anyone noticing, share this with them, because they deserve to hear that someone sees it. Subscribe to Silver Revenge for more stories about ordinary people who built extraordinary things in the time between when everyone went home and before anyone arrived. God bless you. And remember, the key was never just a key.